This is a video from the Casting Shadows blog and channel for RPGaDay 2016. The 20th question for RPGaDay asks us, what was the most challenging but rewarding game that you have learned? And initially, when I was considering my answer for this question, I naturally assumed that I would end up talking about a very complicated game, a game with a lot of moving parts, or a game that's designed around having completely different ways to approach the different aspects of play. You know, where you had to learn a different system for every different thing that a character type or skill might do. But that's not actually what I'm going to talk about. It turns out that the game that gave me the greatest challenge and the greatest reward wasn't actually all that difficult for me to learn at all, the game itself. But getting that game to work at the table was the biggest challenge that I have faced in all my time gaming. What am I talking about? I'm actually talking about heroic pulp gaming using Ubiquity. The first Ubiquity game I came across was All for One, and I fell in love with it right away, and I started looking for other games that use Ubiquity, and I was really hoping I could find someone to run All for One for me, because at the point where I'd found it, I had already given up. I'd given up on running pulp games. I was the type that said, I can't run this type of game. Right? I'd given up on trying comedy. Not funny games, but I'd given up on running overtly comedic games. And I had given up on pulp heroics. Now, I love this. This is the literature that I grew up reading. I read the old pulp stories. It was a huge part of my childhood, and it was frustrating not being able to make it happen at the table. No matter what I tried, no matter what I read, no matter what game I was using, until I got Ubiquity. Now, a lot of things were happening at the same time. The way that All for One is written, the way that Hollow Earth Expedition are written, and the way that Desolation is written, I got them all fairly close together. You know, Desolation was kind of whispering to me. It's like, don't worry about those other two games. You can run me. Right? You know, okay, you've got a problem with running Hollow Earth Expedition because you can't, make it feel like Indiana Jones at the table. And you have a problem with All for One because you can't bring out that kind of devil-may-care atmosphere of the Musketeers. But you could run me because I'm like sword and sorcery, and I'm just waiting for all of your strengths. We can make a pretty awesome game. So with Desolation leaning on me pretty heavily, I thought, well, let's give it a try. And yet, the game that I chose to run, of the three of them that I had at the time, was Hollow Earth Expedition. And honestly, I went into it expecting to fail. I was just hoping that the other people playing the game with me would like the system enough, because I knew right from the beginning how cool the system was. If they liked it, then they would run it and I could play it. As a player in a pulp game, I don't have any trouble at all. I really enjoy it, and it's one of my preferred modes to play. But as a game master in a pulp game, I just felt terrible. Never worked. And this goes way, way, way back. But we'd had some fun sessions running White Wolf's Adventure. And while I didn't like my performance as the game master, they were fun games. We enjoyed pulp. It was something that we wanted to try again. So we tried again with Ubiquity, and it worked. Despite all of the problems that I was bringing to the table running pulp games, it worked. And it did get people interested in the system. It got me really interested in the system. It didn't fix all of my problems. That took something else. But it made me recognize that maybe it wasn't an insurmountable problem. I'd had a really good and exciting session. I had. Maybe I could have another one. Maybe I could figure out what it was that was getting in my way. Maybe I could overcome this challenge and finally get to enjoy running a pulp game. armed with that new attitude, I went looking online for people writing about running pulp games. I went to the forums for Ubiquity-based games, but it seemed like everybody there didn't really have the trouble that I was having. I grew up with pulps. I knew them inside and out, and yet I couldn't make them happen at the table. So I went looking. I found some stuff, but then I found a blog called Campaign Mastery, and they have a fantastic series there, basically about both sides of the problem. The game master who doesn't get it, and the players who don't get it, or who are in some way interfering with the intention to bring that genre to life at the table for one reason or another. And reading through that, the advice was fantastic, but more important to me was the fact that these people had the problem that I was having and got past it. So that was all the evidence that I needed, really, to take stock of what it was. What were my preferences or my expectations or my biases or my way of invoking the system or whatever? What was I doing at the table that was interfering with my fun? Once I started asking myself those questions, I was able to deal with it. And taking Hollow Earth Expedition to the table, taking Desolation to the table, taking All for One to the table, they were all fun. Players were having fun. I was having fun. And I've been having fun ever since. I now feel like pulp games are one of my strengths. And throwing myself into Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars is a direct result of that. So the rewards that came from telling myself, I'm going to run these Ubiquity games. I can't find someone who's going to run them for me, so I'm going to run them. I'm going to try and overcome this challenge one more time. Making that effort totally worthwhile. Not only has it provided me with fun gaming, it's also opened up doors to friendships and new associations I never would have been open to, because I wouldn't have suggested playing Star Wars. I wouldn't have suggested playing supernaturally inflected Musketeers games, and so on. So for me, the challenge was one that I partially brought to the table, and it's a challenge faced by a lot of people who try to run pulp games. And getting over it is because of the infectious enthusiasm present in the rule sets for Ubiquity, the fantastic people involved in producing it, discussions about things with two guys who had been playing the system longer, Daniel Potter for one, and Scott Reimer, the Black Campbell, for another. Their patience and their enthusiasm were really important during this, time where I'm trying to get back on a horse that has pretty violently thrown me off many times in the past. And the great people who write at Campaign Mastery, who were able to reach me even though I was convinced I would never be able to run a pulp game. So overcoming that challenge, that was my biggest reward in learning games. How about you? There's just one more day left in this week, the third week of RPGaDay, and then we're in the home stretch, the last week of questions. For those who are still soldiering on, and there are lots of you, congratulations on making it this far. For those of you who have kind of fallen behind, don't give up. Post some compilation posts. Lots of people out there are doing that. I've really been enjoying reading some of the compilation posts. Actually, they're kind of distilled goodness at certain points in your day, such as during your commute or whatever. So anyway, I will see you tomorrow with the last day of this week. Autocratic's RPGaDay, this year sponsored by the RPG Brigade, is all about sharing the positive aspects of our hobby, role-playing gaming, with a wider world. You can get involved as easily as leaving a comment, posting a tweet, or making a video. #RPGaDay.